Near Future Tech with Jason Griffey.
Thank you. Thanks everyone for taking time out of their evening to come and listen to me, which I always find amazing. I'm going to talk tonight about some of the things I am interested in as it pertains to sort of near future tech. I called it utopia and dystopia because there's two sides to every analysis of technology. Either you love it and you think it makes our lives better, or you are fearful and believe it's going to destroy us all. I think both are probably correct at this point. And so I'm going to talk about a handful of things that are emerged or emerging and how I think they may influence our lives over the next couple of decades. I am Jason, and I'm a librarian, kind of primarily. My background as a librarian, I was the head of IT at the University of Tennessee, Chattanooga Library for just about a decade. And I'm now an affiliate fellow at the Berkman Klein Center for Internet and Society at Harvard. And the phrase internet and society is even now somewhat dated. It is more or less kind of societal impacts on technology and technology's impacts on society, because these things go back and forth over time. What I'm going to talk about tonight are sort of four technologies, four aspects of the world we live in, and how I think we should be thinking about them both from a societal positive and as a societal negative. As I go, please, if you have questions, ask. I don't have any particular need to rush through my slides and wait until you ask me questions. Feel free to ask as we go if there's something that is particularly burning about the topic that we're talking about. And I will leave time, obviously, at the end. We can have a discussion about any or all sort of aspects of technology that I've talked about. So I'm going to start with a thing that is more or less a media tagline at this point, the Internet of Things. It's kind of a meaningless phrase. It just means stuff that is connected. And I wanted to use it as an entryway into technology because it's a good illustration of a few key points about why technology is different than other things in our world. The reason that technology is significantly different than, say, clothing or other, goods that we purchase and consume is that we have kind of laws, we have engineering advances, right, that drive technology in a way that is not the case with other objects in our world. The primary among these is something you probably have heard, at least in passing, at some point, which is Moore's Law. And Moore's Law is named after Gordon Moore, the founder of Intel. He noted back in the late 60s, early 70s, that the amount that chips could do, the amount of processing, right, that happened on a computer chip, doubled roughly every 18 months or so. And at the same time, building that chip cost half as much to make. So we had this sort of exponential curve that was generated in at that point in time to make technology faster and faster and faster and cheaper and cheaper and cheaper. This is completely contrary to the way most normal goods work, right? In general, goods in our world get cheaper and worse or better and more expensive. That is generally the way consumer goods work in our world. And so the fact that technology gets cheaper and cheaper and better is sort of contrary to our typical expectations of consumer goods. The other law that I wanted to talk about as far as technology is not quite as popular as Moore's, but it is called Kumi's Law. And this one is as interesting, if lesser known. And Kumi's Law describes a trend in consumer hardware that actually has to do with the energy consumed by a chip in doing a computation. So Kumi's Law says that for a given unit of computation, for the amount of computations that a chip does, about every 18 months, the amount of energy that is necessary to do that gets cut in half as well. So when you combine more, faster, cheaper, with Kumi, faster and not as much energy necessary, right? You end up with some rather extraordinary things that happen in a fairly short amount of time. So here on stage right, your left, we have the original iMac. On the other side, we have the iPhone 4. And in pretty much every possible way, the iPhone is a better computer than the iMac, right? Way more computational power, much better screen, lots more memory. It's cheaper. Pretty much every way we could measure kind of how good a computer we think it is. It's better. It's a better situation. How many years were there between these two objects? Anybody know? 10. It's 10 years. So the original iMac came out in 2000. The iPhone 4 was released in 2010. To take another slice, another sort of decade slice, right? This is the original iPhone. The original iPhone was released in 2007. 10 years later, we end up with the Apple Watch, right? So this is another 10-year gap. Again, more or less better in every possible way. Generally faster, lots more memory, better screen. It does real-time speech to text. It's got a bunch more radios in it. It measures your heart rate. So the advances that we get in just a 10-year period, while they are incremental to us, right, as we live them, because time moves second to second and we can't help that. When you look at the sort of leaps that can happen in 10-year periods, it's really quite extraordinary. And technology acts differently than everything else in an exponential way, right? So if we imagine that the history of our technology, we've been on the more or less horizontal part of this curve. Many, among them me, many technologists feel fairly strongly that we are just about to hit the hockey stick portion of this, and that things will change faster, more quickly as we move from this point into the future. The side effect of Moore and Kumi is that we now have what we have called the Internet of Things, and that really just means that chips are so inexpensive and computing power is so inexpensive and so low power that we can effectively put connected things in everything we own, right? Your thermostat, the little helpers that live on your desks that listen to your speech and react to you, your car radio, your refrigerator, again, the watch on my wrist. Everyone in here probably has a phone in their pocket. The internet becomes omnipresent and connectivity becomes omnipresent because of Moore and Kumi. And it gets to the point very, very quickly where, very, very soon, very near future, where everything that used to have any sort of tracking, any sort of label, any sort of informational piece that needed to be attached to it will now be done with a chip that connects to the internet. This is the case for everything from socks, where we now have socks with the internet built into them that measures temperature for diabetics, to, and no, I did not mock this up, smart diapers that tell you when they are dirty. When you have connected chips that are cheap enough to put into diapers, you can be pretty sure they will be put into everything in the world. And several years ago, a science fiction author named Charlie Strauss, who, if you have not read, I highly recommend, wrote a sort of a wonderful blog post. This is 6 years ago now almost, called How Low Power Can You Go? Where he said, well, you know what, he's a science fiction author, so he said, we know what Moore's law looks like, and we know what Kumi's law looks like, and we know what our current state of technology is. So let's just do some math. Let's just see what this looks like. How cheap do things actually get? How low power do things actually get if we just kind of take what we know now and move it forward several decades? So he looked at 20 years. What would it look like sort of 20 years from now? And he took as his baseline effectively an iPad. So if you have an iPad, everything that an iPad will do right now, camera, microphone, connected to the internet, connected to the cell system, monitor, voice response, sort of all of the things that one might do with an iPad. And he said, well, what does that look like 20 years from now? Well, it looks like a chip that is 1 millimeter by 1 millimeter square that is so low power that it will run off of ambient light. That's what the math tells us is coming, right? It also costs about 10 cents. So what does a world look like where we have iPads that are invisible to the naked eye that cost 10 cents each? I said, well, he's a science fiction author. He said, well, what happens with that? What do you do with that? And he said, well, governments are going to want to kind of spread them around and use them to monitor everything, right? Like that's what we do these days. So he said, well, how much would it cost to cover a metro area? How much would it cost to cover, say, the city of London? This is the city of London. What if we took these little grains of magical sand and spread them around the city of London and covered the entire city, one of these every few feet, all of them connected, all of them talking to each other, all of them listening to you, all of them aware of what's happening in the street, all of them, understanding the city in a way. How much would that cost? Well, to cover the entire city of London in these, less than 2 decades away chips costs about 150 million pounds. Sounds like a fair amount of money until you look at the London city budget and realize that they spent 190 million pounds cleaning gum off of streets. It is a rounding error for a major metro area to do this sort of thing. So what sort of world does it look like? Right? What does this world that is approaching us at somewhat breakneck speed, what does it look like when every object in the world is a camera and a microphone and is connected to each other? There's good stuff. If I have a heart attack and fall on the sidewalk is smart enough to call an ambulance for me. That's pretty cool. At the same time, I think we all have some awareness of what a surveillance state negative might be, right? So we have good and we have bad. What we don't have, I think, is the ability to avoid this because these chips are coming in 10, 15, 20 years. We're going to have things that can do this and that will be that cheap and that will be, in your clothing and in your shoes and in your jewelry and in whatever you might pass on the street. So that's a world I find very strange, and I'm certainly not smart enough to know all of the side effects of this. What I do know is that things get really weird, and they get even weirder when we take into account things like virtual reality and augmented reality, which is the second thing I wanted to talk about tonight. VR is probably something you've heard, again, bandied about. We are right at the emergence of sort of virtual entertainment, whether it be games or movies, VR gaming. The distinction between VR and AR, if you are not kind of aware of the two different kinds of technologies, virtual reality is usually used when you have a screen in front of your eyes that is completely occluding the world, right? It is replacing the world entirely. So in this case, we have a Google Cardboard where there is a little phone that slides in place, and that becomes the thing you see. You are only seeing what that world, what the display in front of your eyes gives you. We have headsets ranging from Oculus Rift to HTC Vive. This is an upcoming one, the Lenovo Mirage, which is going to be built into the Google sort of VR ecosystem. This is going to go on your face and completely replace the world that that is in front of you. Now, this is actually quite interesting for things like education, where we have the ability. Google has an entire set of sort of curriculum about world history, about ecology that revolves around VR, that revolves around the ability for me to go to this place that I would never see or never experience, and experience or see it, right? Whether that is from a historical perspective where I can see the history of a place, or whether it is from they have one that is revolved around the destruction of the rainforest, for instance, right? You can see how much of it has been destroyed over time. So this has the potential to be incredibly powerful. I, however, am way more interested in what's called augmented reality. And augmented reality is usually understood as a similar sort of technology, except that you are experiencing the real world with digital objects in it. So you have, instead of having a complete overlay, you have instead the real world with not real things there, right? So you can actually experience this now with cell phones, even if you don't have little fancy glasses. If you have an iPhone, Apple has a development kit called AR Kit that has been used by manufacturers like IKEA to allow you, of course, to view what their furniture would look like in your house, even if you don't have it physically. You hold your phone up and go, "I'd like my couch there," and it just shows you what that looks like. Right? You can use it in a more kind of useful tool-like way. This is an example of an ARKit app that allows you to basically hold your phone up and point it and measure the length of the area of your room. It's like a virtual ruler, kind of living in the world, in the digital world, with the real world impinged upon the real world. Your phone is interesting. It's an interesting experience. There's all kinds of fun things you can do, games and entertainment and such. This is a step toward the, of course, near future, I'm going to use that word a whole lot tonight, of having headsets that interact with digital objects that are not really there, but are there in your vision. Microsoft makes an example of this. It's kind of the first commercially available one, called the HoloLens. The HoloLens allows you to wear on your head something that gives you very realistic and things you can interact with, holograms in the world that react to the world. It's as if they are really there, even though they are not really there. If you have not seen this sort of thing, I've got a little short video that gives you some idea.
Microsoft HoloLens brings holograms into your real world. Using transparent lenses, spatial sound, and an understanding of your environment, holograms look and sound like they're actually part of the world around you. That is mixed reality. With Microsoft HoloLens, holograms are viewed through the holographic frame centered in the middle of your view. This preserves your peripheral vision, so you can move freely and connect and collaborate with people around you. Holograms in mixed reality don't block out what you can see and hear. This enables you to engage with digital content and tools alongside the objects in your real world. Holograms can be world-locked in a physical location, so you can walk around them, or they can travel with you. You can even hear them in 3D with spatial sound. Microsoft HoloLens is the world's first.
So, gives you an idea of the sort of thing you can do with AR. This is a blending of the digital and the real in a way that, again, you could obviously see uses for this in education, uses for this in entertainment. I was actually going to ask, Eli, does the library have a HoloLens? Not yet? Okay. Many public libraries do. This is something that libraries are beginning to experiment with and beginning to even develop some content for, allow patrons to develop content for. The sort of up-and-coming leader in this space, it has not released anything yet, but the sort of leader appears to be a company called Magic Leap, which is incredibly secretive, but they have some really sorts of amazing demos that involve everything from sort of desktop interactions, replacing what would be a traditional desktop computer or tablet or even phone, and replacing it entirely with this digital sort of overlaid interface with the world. You can see, you can imagine, obviously, this sort of thing. So this is a kind of a work example. This is a little loud, so I apologize, but you've got gaming. So if you want to fight robots in your office, you'll be able to do that. And entertainment, of course.
Might I have a word with you, please? I regret to report that due to unforeseen circumstances, we have not yet reached the desired arrangement with Jabba the Hutt regarding Captain Solo's death. An army of stormtroopers is searching for us. It can only be a matter of time before we are blasted into spare parts.
I'm totally dating myself here, but if I can have R2-D2 and C-3PO in my house dealing like with me all the time, I am so into this.
How did we get into this mess? I really don't know how.
So this is a new sort of paradigm for both computer interfaces, for entertainment, for how we interact with digital things. And many people, again, who are much smarter than me, think that this is a fundamental shift in the way we understand computing. This is a quote, sometime in 93 or 94, I read Snow Crash, and for the first time I thought something like the metaverse might be possible in my lifetime. We're on the cusp of what I think is not the next big platform, but the final platform, the platform to end all platforms. Mike Abrish, who is a developer, a game developer, feels pretty strongly, he now works for Facebook, which is lovely, but he believes that AR is going to actually fundamentally shift how we interact with digital, full stop. And one of the reasons he believes this is, of course, the near future is not a big faceplate that you put on your head and walk around looking like a cyborg. The near future is these things live in your eyeball, right? One can easily imagine a virtual overlay on a contact lens with an LED grid, because we are already building them. This is a prototype that was developed for, again, of course, the Department of Defense, for heads-up displays in combat. And it runs, one of my favorite little touches is that one of the ways it powers itself is that it has a small heat pump that operates on the differential between the temperature of the air and the temperature of your eyeball. A little spinning turbine that generates electricity. These are real. This is not that's not a mock-up. That's an actual physical thing that someone is holding. These are on the way. This is, I think this was an 8x8 grid. You know, it's just a matter of time before it gets denser and denser, and you have full overlays of your visual field. So that's cool for entertainment and for movies and for many things. It is an atrocious affront to our society, because when you have complete control over your visual field, it means that you no longer have to see anything you don't want to see, including people that you might not want to see. And so I have a huge amount of fear when in the last year we have disagreement on basic facts about science and reality, when we have the ability within the next couple of decades to have people that are physically sitting in the same place and disagreeing about the reality around them, I think that is a fundamental shift in how humanity deals with itself. And I have a lot of concerns about how we as social animals deal with the ability to control everything about our visual experience. I'm fairly, at one point I was fairly utopic, and the last year has made me fairly dystopic about what is likely to happen when these things are possible. So I'm worried about that. The other thing I'm worried about, this is number 3 on the hit parade of technologies, artificial intelligence and machine learning. So this is not a new topic. AI and machine learning is a topic in technology that has been around literally decades and decades and decades, since more or less the advent of digital computing, full stop. Since World War II, people have been talking about AI as it pertains to digital computing. And when I'm talking about AI here, I don't actually mean Terminator-style, self-aware, cyborgs that walk around. AI doesn't have to be that to be either interesting, useful, or dangerous. Most of the time when we're talking in AI machine learning circles, we use the words either strong or weak AI. So strong AI is usually the sort of like a human, right? Self-reasoning, self-aware, artificial intelligence. I think we're still a fair distance from that. We don't understand the brain very well at all, even today, and it will be a while before we get to the point where we can replicate anything like that in digital form. What we do have today, more or less everywhere, is weak AI. That is expert systems that are trained by taking huge amounts of data, letting them analyze it, and then starting to make decisions about objects or digital goods on their own, right? They're making decisions about classification, they're making decisions about real-world objects, what to do with something in the world. Again, if you have a smartphone in your pocket, you have an AI in your pocket, because all modern cell phones have some AI capability, basically, built into them. If you use Google Photos, then you are using an AI that can tell you what a cat looks like, right? Over the years, we have kind of moved the target. We've moved what we think AI really is. Games have been a popular kind of explanation of what we would mean for something to be smart. Originally, it was in the 40s, late 40s, early 50s. It was tic-tac-toe. Can a computer beat a human regularly at something simple like that? And then it was checkers. Then it was chess. Kasparov and Deep Blue famously, where an IBM computer beat arguably the world's greatest human chess player. More recently, it was Go, the game Go, which was defeated 2 years ago maybe by a computer, by an AI. Jeopardy famously had Watson compete, right, in a game of AI. So we know that seemingly every time we move the goalpost for AI, it gets better and better and better. What does that mean for our world? Well, some people are fairly pessimistic about how AI is going to work out for us. This is Elon Musk, if you are not aware, the guy behind Tesla Motors. He was quoted in an interview saying, "With artificial intelligence, we are summoning the demon." You know, those stories where there's a guy and there's pentagram and a holy water, and he's like, yeah, I can control this demon. It never works out. So he is fairly pessimistic about the way that AI is going to interact with our world, being, digital superintelligence being the end game in his mind. Now, I'm not quite that pessimistic. But the current incarnations of AI that we have positive sorts of effects from are around, right? Again, Google Photos, photo analysis, data analysis sorts of things where there's not really a lot on the line. Whether or not it knows that there's a cat in your photo is not actually that important. It's just kind of a cool party trick. However, we actually have really sort of literal life and death decisions now where AI is doing better than humans. There have been multiple studies of AIs versus medical doctors when given a list of symptoms and coming up with an accurate diagnosis of what those symptoms point towards, where AIs are much better in general of doing the diagnosing. This is specifically the case when a lot of the diagnostic material is image-based. And the biggest, most obvious area for this is radiology. This is actually a very, very near future, within the next several years, that radiologists are likely to be disenfranchised by AIs pretty quickly, because AIs and expert systems are much, much, much better at looking at pictures of your skin and telling you whether or not something is a carcinoma than radiologists are, it turns out. This quote, Jeffrey Hinton, for anyone who is a library lover, Jeffrey Hinton is the great-great-grandson of George Boole, who invented Boolean logic. I love that. I just think that was incredibly cool, keeping the science in the family. AI is also really great. Again, for those of you who like libraries, I threw a library example in. We're in a library. I threw a library example in. To my knowledge, this is the first actual machine learning system that's been thrown at real library work, which is kind of fun. This is Hamlet, which stands for How About Machine Learning Enhanced Theses at MIT. This is a project by a developer at MIT named Andromeda Yelton, who decided to take a neural net and throw the entirety of MIT's thesis, full text, at it and let it analyze and index it, and then allow you to have a recommendation engine where you could say, I have this thesis, show me all the ones that are related, like conceptually related to it. More interestingly, it has an upload file oracle, which means that it actually has a system where you can take any arbitrary text, take a text from a news story that you just read, throw it into this system and hit go. The AI will take a look, the machine learning system will take a look at your text, analyze it for meaning, and then give you the theses at MIT that are most closely related to the thing that you just gave it, the conceptual text you just gave it. This is done without kind of human metadata cataloging sorts of things going on. It is kind of magical when you try it. The first thing I did was try to break it. So I fed it the entirety of the text of J.M. Barrie's Peter Pan, trying to see if it would just give me nonsense, right? There's not going to be an MIT thesis about Peter Pan. So like, what's it going to tell me, right? What it returned to me was all of the creative writing theses from MIT, which was, for anyone who pays attention to how indexing and cataloging works, kind of like magic, because it didn't know what I gave it. It had to understand it, and then it had to understand, one, that it was fiction and creative, right? And then it had to go and find the fiction and creative things and associate them and bring them back to me. Truly awesome, cool use, excuse me, of machine learning and AI. Of course, with the good comes mountains and mountains and mountains of bad. Machine learning systems are only as good as the data that you feed them to train them. And it turns out that in a lot of cases where we would love for machine learning systems to be objective in some way, or even if we throw aside what we might imagine objectivity to be, equitable in some way, right? To look at equity as in treatment of the human condition, it's only as good as the data we give it. And it turns out that the data that we have is often horrible and, well, in many ways. So it introduces bias, often non-intentional bias. Nobody does this intentionally. It is not that when Google built Google Photos, they wanted Google Photos to identify African American people as gorillas, because of course they did not want that to happen. However, that is exactly what happened. because the training data that they fed their system was not objective or equitable. This was kind of a big deal for Google. This is a horrible thing. It should never have happened. But when you have data and you just let the AI go at it, sometimes this sort of thing does. Microsoft, in their non-understanding of how bad it could be, decided to create a Twitter bot, a artificial sort of intelligence, right, that lived on Twitter and that learned from what people gave it. So this was designed to be a sort of teenage girl personality that would interact with people via Twitter and learn from them. So they launched this Twitter bot. It was called Tay. It took 24 hours before the Twitter bot was a racist, hate-mongering Nazi because of what people gave it. People interacting with it did so in a way that reinforced this behavior, and so the AI very quickly learned to be racist, right? Even when you don't have sort of this public data, terrible associations going on, you can have situations where AI is tuned to deliberately be non-equitable. This happens, unsurprisingly, in a capitalist society where maximizing profit is an awesome thing. So companies like Uber used AI to determine how much they could possibly charge you. So they looked at all of the kind of data around the location you were picked up in, what kind of cell phone you were using. If you used an iPhone, you got charged more than if you were using Android. If you got picked up next to a ritzy restaurant, you were charged more than if you were picked up next to a college dive. It used all of its sort of information about what you were doing and an AI to determine what could they absolutely charge you at the moment you called them. Right? Obviously, not the sort of thing that we would actually want to be done with it. And we're just kind of getting started in our world of disagreeing about fact and information, where AI is going to start playing a part in how we see what media feeds us. So here's a quick test for you. So AIs have begun to be tuned to create humans, so to create what looks to you like a human being, for use in video and photographic evidence, right? So which of those is a real human? It's a trick. They're both artificial, right? So these are both completely computer-generated fake people. These are not real people. And this is a very easy thing for AIs to do at this point. None of these people are real. These are all completely fabricated individuals, right? And it doesn't take a whole long time for an AI to do this at this point. You can have, this is not just still photos, you can have full video, full interactiveness. You can interview somebody, right? And they could be completely not a real person. You can change basic things about the world using AI systems. So here's an example of a AI that was developed at a university in, I believe this was in the UK, where they did simple things: zebras to horses and horses to zebras, summer to winter. Taking a scene and tuning the AI to make it look the way you'd like it to look, rather than the way it actually looked. Trusting photographs and video evidence is going to get real interesting in the next 10 years. Trusting speech is also going to be real interesting. Google has an AI that can effectively sound exactly like a human. People can't A/B test and know that they're not talking to a computer anymore. More so, there is an AI system. This is online. You can actually visit this and demo it yourself if you want, called Arbor, where with about a couple of minutes of audio of anyone. They can sample the phonemes out of the audio and then recombine them in any way that you want. So this is at the demo here is you can just type in text and have it read in the voice of Barack Obama, because we have lots of extant audio of him, and we can just feed it in here, and you can have him say anything you want, anything in the world, because you just type it. Sounds just like him. Most worrisome to some, here I told you to visit this and to Google a couple of things. Absolutely do not Google this word, like at all. Just don't. Trust me on this. But there is a new system that has emerged over the course of the last 6 to 8 months called deepfakes, which is actually runnable on a laptop. This is a small kind of a mini AI system that will run locally on a desktop computer that allows you to take any video footage and put anyone's face on it. The net is having a huge amount of fun putting Nicolas Cage into every movie. So you can download a copy of a couple of scenes of things like Lord of the Rings, where every member of the Fellowship is Nicolas Cage. So those are fun. But again, it doesn't take very long to determine the sorts of nefarious things that could happen with a media blitz of someone's face on a body that they did not actually do. So AI is going to cause a huge amount of issues over the course of the next 10 years or so as it relates to kind of understanding the media that is given to us. And last, the fourth of the technologies that I wanted to talk about is robots, related to AI. This is related to artificial intelligence. We usually, in our head, right, when we think robot, we don't think like non-smart things. We think men that walk around that shape little mechanical dudes, right? The truth is, of course, that robots in the future aren't going to look like this, and the ones that matter don't look like this even now. The robots that really matter in our world in the near future look like this, because a self-driving car is just a robot that you fit into, right? It's just a robot that you ride inside. This is great. Self-driving cars are a miracle. I have myself a 10-year-old daughter whom I hope never, ever, ever drives a car ever for any reason, ever. I would love it if she only ever got, chauffeured around by a robot, because if we tried to invent something that drove worse than humans, we'd have a hard time. Robots are basically better in every possible way at driving than we are. And it's great, right? Again, I've said a couple of times, positives and negatives. The positives, this is fantastic. Self-driving everything is fantastic for disabled, right? For our elderly population here in the U.S. Anyone that's incapacitated for sort of any physical reason, right? Like, it's an amazing bit of freedom to have a robot that will take you wherever you want to go. It is also going to wreak havoc on our society because, of course, this is a map that shows the most common middle-income job in each state. So for the purposes of earning a median income in the state, these are the jobs that do so. This is based on U.S. Census data. So you probably notice a pattern. And you probably know that the easiest, and you probably derive at least, that the easiest sort of driving to automate is over-the-road trucking, because it's point-to-point and it's, single speed and over the interstates, doesn't require getting into downtown areas and everything, right? Over-the-road trucking is very, very quickly moving to being more or less fully automated. This is an example of a Tesla, but every major truck company, every major freight moving company has models that they're playing with. Within the next decade, the majority of traffic for big rig, moving here in the U.S. is likely to be through automated driving systems of one kind or another. So when these jobs all go away and we kind of gut a lot of the middle income out of a lot of these states, we're going to have a really interesting couple of decades trying to sort out what that means for our economy, right? Not just for the individual people, which obviously is a worry, but for the larger economy, it introduces a lot of very unusual things. And it's not just trucking or automated driving or delivery or things like this, right? It's not just drones dropping your Amazon packages off. This is, there are 2 of these in the U.S. right now. Of course, both of them are in San Francisco. This is Cafe X, a fully automated, roboticized coffee shop where you place your order and there's a robot barista who prepares your coffee and gives it to you. The first 2 are here in the U.S. Obviously, any sort of service job, right? You can imagine these sorts of things moving into. And even what we would normally consider a sort of personal person-to-person interaction there are instances where this is being done away with and automated by a computer. Has anybody ever interacted with a pepper? Yeah, where at? In Japan, okay. Anyone else? No. So this is effectively a helper bot, right? It is designated. It's usually used in sort of public spaces to do directional or other sorts of quick answer assistance things. It has cameras that does facial recognition. It knows if you're happy or sad, and it will actually kind of tune itself as to how it should respond to you, depending upon your emotional state. The thing on its screen is a touch screen, so sometimes it'll ask you questions like, tell me where you want to go, and it'll show you a map, and you can point it, and it'll be, oh, okay, I'll show you how. Let's follow me, and it'll lead you where you need to go. These are becoming more and more popular. I've seen them in several airports around even the U.S. I've seen them in other countries. But this sort of thing is going to be more and more common. It's very, very, very common at this point in Japan, where they are moving at breakneck speed to this sort of automation, largely because of their population age difference. They need a lot of helpers. They don't have enough little physical people to help their elderly population. So they're relying on robots to do that. So this is a chart that was that's provided in a book called The Future of Employment by a couple of authors, Frey and Osborne. The black is the current number of jobs. The white is the going to be number of jobs. And I know that it's not really readable, especially back in the back. But the top one is retail salespeople, so you can see the difference there. Cashiers, secretaries. The ones that tend to be the safest, according to these authors, are teachers, nurses, people who have sort of direct contact, person-to-person contact. But many of what we consider kind of standard entry-level jobs, retail, things like that, are going to largely be kind of sort of decimated by these. This incoming automation AI robot world. On the other hand, we may all have cute robot puppies, and it'll all be fine. This is actually available. You can buy one of these if you want. This is Sony's Aibo robot dog. You may have seen them in the early 2000s. They just re-released them. So you too can own your own robot pet. So in kind of conclusion, wrapping up, I wanted to close with just a couple of thoughts about what kind of the speed of this world that we're coming to. Kevin Kelly, technologist, founder of Wired magazine and a number of other publications, says that the next 20 years will dwarf those of the last 20. I think that's true. I agree with him. If you think about the amount of change you've seen over the last 20 years, the next 20 are going to make them look like nothing. Not even a blip. We are moving up this curve very fast. And the faster we move, the faster we move. We are accelerating not slowing down. It doesn't mean that all technology will go away. This is one of my favorite technology graphs of all time. This is the break-even distance between sail and steam between 1850 and 1890. This illustrates how technology change sometimes happens. In the 1850s and 1860s, it was sailing ships still ruled long-distance freight. If you wanted to go from, say, Europe to Africa, you still did so on a sailing ship because a steamship could not carry enough coal to actually make the distance because the engines were not efficient enough. Enter the 1880s, and the efficiency of the engines became such that a ship could effectively carry enough coal to get itself from one continent to the other. And so sailing ships began to die off, and by the 1890s, you no longer ship things with sailing ships. You instead did everything with steam and coal. This, I imagine, is going to reflect the same sort of thing that automated driving is going to reflect. We're going to see this similar sort of adoption. It doesn't happen all at once, but as the economics of the decision to use an automated system versus a non-automated system change, at some point there will be a tip, and that tip is probably coming sooner than we believe. So in closing, I'm going to close with a quote from one of my very favorite science fiction authors, Douglas Adams, who said, "Anything that is in the world when you are born is normal and ordinary and a natural part of the way the world works. Anything that's invented between when you are 15 and 35 is new and exciting and revolutionary, and you can probably get a career in it. Anything that is invented after you are 35 is against the natural order of things." As someone who is admittedly over 35, this is somewhat true given my daughter's proclivity with Snapchat. I don't understand it in the least. I do rail against this instinct, though, and I try very hard in these talks to say, like, if we are going to make it through this next couple of decades, we are going to need to not believe that these new technologies are against the natural order of things. We are going to need to figure out how to deal with them. So with that, I have hit questions. You guys did not interrupt me, which either means you didn't have them or you were too scared to interrupt me. So while this loads my final slide, which has my contact information and website and everything you might want to know about me, don't be creepy, then feel free to reach out, though, if you want. Thank you all for coming out. I appreciate your time. Hope it was good. Thank you.
This program was recorded on March 13th, 2018 at the Ann Arbor District Library.